It's Rachel Hila. Hello, my name is Peter Underwood, and I'm one of your co-hosts. And I'm streaming from the south end of Vancouver Island in Lekwungen and Saanich territories.
And hi everyone, I am Maureen Vo, and I am on the very opposite end of where Peter is, on the very northern tip of Vancouver Island, on the unceded territory of the Kwakwaka'wakw First Nations, just outside of a place called Port McNeill. So welcome everyone to Coastal Insights, episode 4, season 2, Eyes on the Coast, and spring is in the air, so finally. So thank you for being here. Because spring is in the air, there are a lot of school groups on spring break right now. So typically our virtual live studio is full of classrooms joining us, but they're out enjoying their spring break. So hopefully you are all enjoying your spring break, and we would love to learn where everyone is joining from that are here today. So if you could share with us in the comments where you are located, maybe also share with us if this is your first episode or if this is your 4th or more episode. We'd love to hear all of that. We like seeing where all of our guests are from.
And we will be kind of taking questions at the end too. So if you have any thoughts that come up or questions you'd like to ask, save them to the end and then drop them in the comments so we can see them.
Yeah, and if this is your first episode, this whole series is focused on connecting people to our coastal environment in British Columbia and learning about our conservation issues and learning all of this using a two-eyed seeing framework. And so that means we're drawing in knowledge from Indigenous perspectives and Western knowledge systems to really open up your understanding of the world around us and how we navigate through all of this. And so this episode, we're really excited because we have a spotlight session. So our spotlight sessions feature interesting and fascinating guests that can highlight some of these topics that we're focusing on and talking about. And so we have 2 really interesting guests today that I will introduce in a second. So we have great, our whole topic today is on harvesting. So what that means is, what are we harvesting on the coast here? How are we harvesting it? When? Looking at some of these interesting techniques that are being used and some really cool projects to revitalize some traditional harvesting techniques on the coast here. And so let's do a quick check-in on where some of these people are joining from.
We have someone from Delta, and they're here for the first episode, and Coquitlam First Nation territory.
3rd episode. Nice. Awesome. So I'm going to introduce our first guest. I'm very excited to introduce our first guest. He is a long-time rain coaster. So he's been with our team for the past 12 years. So since day 1 of our bear studies in the Great Bear Rainforest. And there's a nice picture of our field crew. And so our guest is a citizen of the Helsik First Nation, living in Bella Bella, and a long-time harvester. So he is the ultimate harvester, comes from a long line of hunting and fishing people. And so he is out on the water and out on the lands harvesting. I think last year, he said more than 250 days last year. And so he's here to share his knowledge on some of the things that we harvest on the coast here. But aside from being a harvester, he is also an educator. So in many different realms, he educates the community, and formally through the Bella Bella Community School for the Outdoor Club. He's also a fishing guide for the past 25 years. He knows this coast very well, so he's able to really showcase what we have on the coast. He's also a researcher and scientist, not only with Rain Coast, but other universities, SFU. And so I am glad to welcome here today our Rain Coast friend and colleague, Howard Humgent.
Good afternoon. I'm up in Bella Bella right now. We're getting ready for the herring spawn. So everyone's kind of running around, getting their lines in the water. going out to check the kelps, going out and waiting for the herring. Now, when the herring first show up, it's the marine mammals that show up with them, the whales, the porpoises, the dolphins, the seals. Many shorebirds are starting to show up, and it's a good time of year.
Sorry, we're just gonna start the slideshow. So there's a couple images we're gonna share here. I'm just gonna get set up. All right. Yeah, so Howard, do you want to walk us through? We talked about with the Wasanich, the 13 moon calendar, and this is a great image of dividing the different seasons by some of the different things that you can find. Do you want to walk us through this image?
Yeah. So again, we're starting our new year is this time of year where the herring are showing up. So in here it lists herring. Later it'll be salmon, like seaweed, abalone, but that's a protected species nowadays. And then prawns and crabs and shrimp and all these other delightful things from the ocean. And then we move through summer where it's sockeye and salmon. It says here halibut and cod, but halibut and cod, they're more of a year-round. We fish them year-round. And then we get into the fall where it's more in the salmon and of course in the summer, some of the things that aren't on here are things like cedar bark. Cedar bark harvest is in May and June, and so this is kind of a broad array of what we harvest here in the territory.
That's great. Okay, and so now I think Peter, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so it seems like right now is the herring season.
Yeah, so again, this is some of the herring on hemlock, on flat kelp, and on boa kelp. And then you can see this on the bottom left here is a picture of my dad and I on the boat there, and we chopped down some coastal hemlock, and we soak those in the water, and the herring spawn on the trees, and we pull the trees out of the water to harvest the eggs.
And is there a particular tree that is used most commonly?
Yeah, a coastal hemlock. So a young hemlock. The leaves are flat. Where a mountain hemlock, the leaves kind of go all over. So we want the flat hemlock is what we're looking for, and we'll use a log and tie the trees off the log, and then on the bottom of the tree we'll tie a rock about this big on the bottom, so that we will sit low in the water, and the herring will come in and spawn on it.
Okay.
And then this is harvest day. So we're harvesting the flat leaf kelp, and the little guy in the orange hat is our son Nathan. And we teach. This is how we teach here at home. Is the little ones that get right in there and they get their hands right in there, and they're learning. They're learning by doing these things. Like harvesting the kelp and putting them in the tote, and just being in there, elbows right into the work. And as you see the bottom left picture, is he's laughing so hard. So it's a really wonderful time of year. Like all the families, we all get together and we go out and we harvest. And this is actually the only day of the year that I eat herring roe is on harvest day. And that's just personal preference.
And so is it eaten like fresh right away, or can you save it and preserve it for later to eat like throughout the year?
It's preserved. This method here is we're salting it and in a dry salt, and it'll go into a salt brine. A lot of the times it'll be bagged up and put in the freezer and taken out throughout the year for, you know, you can steam it, use boiling water, boil water, and then take the water off of the heat, put the eggs in, give it a whirl, and dump the water out, and it's ready. Or some people will pickle it with vinegar and soy sauce and onions. But again, the only day I eat it is on harvest day. So that'll be coming up soon for us.
Wow. And do you have a preference between the roe on hemlock or the kelp? Is there a preference in taste? Are they much different?
Well, when we eat the roe on kelp, like the herring on the kelp, we'll eat the whole kelp. Where when we put the hemlock boughs in, we'll peel it and try and remove as much of the needles as possible. So then we have just that little hint of hemlock taste to it. Whereas opposed to eating the whole kelp, you get the whole taste of the kelp. And for me, it doesn't matter. It's all delicious.
Yeah, I've tasted the one on kelp, and it was delicious. I'd love to try it again. Yeah.
So one of the indicators, if we go back to the herring for a second, one of the indicators on a good herring year is in the wintertime, our very first snowfall of the year generally will tell us what the herring are doing. One year we had 13 inches of heavy snow and as our first snowfall of the year. And our our herring spawn was so fast that it was all over within 6 days. And this year it was we had a little bit of snow and then nothing and a little bit of snow. So maybe this year our herring will kind of take longer to spawn. So it's an indicator on how fast the season will go or how much herring is returning. And these are things that have been taught to us since I was, Nathan's age. So it's quite good to learn these things. I learned from my dad, my grandfathers, and my uncles and my brothers. And Nathan is learning from from me, from my dad, and my brothers. So it's this is how we learned. And when his attention gets long enough, we'll tell him all the indicators to change seasons. So that's kind of where he is right now. It's all fun and games for him. But when he gets older, he'll start to learn all the indicators of the seasons. So that's kind of where he's at right now. He's still having fun.
Oh, yeah, that's so key to figuring out what will be coming next and what's happening in each season. And one thing actually I just wanted to kind of sidestep on is just from your experience, are you noticing any changes in these indicators throughout the years? Like, are things coming at different times than before or after?
Yeah, there's years where things don't line up on indicators, where either the winter was too warm or the winter was too cold, or the plants grew too fast and the fish didn't show up when the plants grew. So things are kind of changing, and we're then we have to actually get out into the ground, like out onto the land and into the areas where the fish return, and then do more investigation from there, as opposed to having the ability to look at a plant and say that, the seaweed is ready. As we, the next slide is seaweed. So if we can flip to that one. So this is this is on the seaweed grounds in the territory here, and I'm climbing the rocks and we're picking nori seaweed. Now, an indicator plant for seaweed is false elderberry up here. When the elderberry flowers, its beautiful white flower, that's when it's time to go to the seaweed grounds and harvest seaweed. But if the winter has been a strange winter with, with cold or too mild, and the plants wake up too early, then it's not going to line up, and then we kind of have to go out to the grounds and see if it's growing. We're lucky enough to have at least 3 growths of seaweed in the spring. So this is taken in mid-May, late May, early June, and we'll go out to the outer coast and climb around these rocks and harvest seaweed. When I was a kid, the seaweed grounds, each family kind of had their own little area that we harvested from. And this photo was actually taken at a different family location close to where we picked. So I went onto this rock, but before I did, I said to the family, hey, I'm going to come over and collect some seaweed. I'll take only a couple of bags, as you see the one white bag there, and then the one white bag, the seaweed, or the seaweed sack as we call them, or the rice sack. So I had 2 there, and I only took a couple out of there, leaving enough for the family if they show up after me. So the indicator plant that is the elderberry, and when the elderberry flowers, it's time for us to go and look for seaweed.
Nice. And what's the type of seaweed that you harvest most commonly?
This is a nori seaweed. So we will harvest it, put it in the sack, and then we'll take it home, and we will dry them on cedar racks. So we make our own racks of from cedar, and then we'll put it out in the sun. So in the May and June, when the days are nice and long and it's nice and warm, we'll put them out in the yard, and we'll dry them on the seaweed racks in the sun, and then from there we'll take them inside and we'll put them in the oven to give it a nice crisp, and then we'll crunch it up and put it in airtight containers for the winter. And this is also a trade item. So some of our nations that live close to us, they don't get seaweed. So we would go to Bella Coola and trade with, soapberries and moose meat and other foods that we don't normally get in our territory. So then we'll take seaweed, we'll take some cod and halibut and some herring eggs, and we'll go to Bella Coola and we'll make a trade for soapberries and for hooligans and moose meat, with our families. So this is something that's been going on for thousands of years, where we would go in and make trades with food, and it continues to this day.
Amazing. And is there a trade item that you most look forward to getting or trading?
I like to trade for soapberries. It's a dessert thing. We'll blend it up with a little bit of water and a little bit of sugar, and it foams up like a mousse. And my best memory from soapberries is with my grandfather Wesley, who taught me a lot of things about harvesting and about being on the land. And we would have it, once or twice, once or twice a week. We would have it, go down and watch hockey, and there'd be soapberries and hockey. So that's kind of what I look forward to when I have trades.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've never tried soapberry, but I heard it's delicious. I'd love to one day.
And then that'll move us. So This is seagull eggs. Seagull eggs are. It's a really short window to harvest them. Again, if we're near an area that has a area where the birds haul out, we'll go by and we'll see a lot of seagulls there. So then we will climb around and look in the nests. Now, what we'll do is we'll take a small container and we'll fill it with seawater and we put the egg into the container. If it sinks, it's harvestable. If it floats, then it means it's already developed, and we put it back into the nest and move on. We would use them for baking. Some people eat them, and it's a short window. And a few of our elders still really enjoy the seagull egg harvest. So, when we're on the bear study and we happen to be going by one of the rocks further south that have seagull eggs or seagull nests on them, we'll hop off and run around and collect a few eggs and then bring it home and bring it to our elders, and it's a nice treat for them.
And do you find it much different from like the eggs we get from chickens? Like, is the taste quite different?
It tastes a little bit different and they're bigger. So it's a close-up photo when there's really no scale in the photo,
Yeah.
but they're actually a lot bigger than seagull or than chicken eggs. Like if your recipe calls for 2 eggs, you use 1 seagull egg. So, and some of the aunties, they're famous for their chocolate seagull egg cake, and
Yeah.
bring them a bunch of seagull eggs, and it's like all I want is a couple of slices of the cake. So it's something that's it's an opportunity, and if they're there, we'll harvest them. If they're not, then we try it anyway. So I thought it would be nice to show a part of our seasonal harvest, and this is usually in May and June.
Amazing.
Wow, yeah, thanks for sharing. I actually have a question about seagull eggs, so I thought I'd hop on. Have you noticed any or have you heard of any kind of changes over the generations, or maybe even the last generation in the quality of seagull eggs? Something that I've kind of been hearing down here is that seagull eggs aren't as good to eat anymore because of the city, and seagulls are kind of eating a lot of human things and things that have affected the quality of their eggs.
I'm not sure if that would be as the same up here because we're so rural. Like, there's not a whole lot of urban areas here. Like there's Bella Bella, there's Shearwater, and then further north there's Clamptoo, and then further south there's Rivers Inlet. So there's not a whole lot of areas where the seagulls will be getting into food from humans, I guess.
Good. That's so good to hear. Oh, cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yes. And then I believe our next slide is cedar. Yes. So again, cedar. These are cedar bark that I started removing probably 3 or 4 years ago. I actually started to harvest cedar, and I knew when the seasons were, but I kind of only had an idea on how to harvest them. So I kind of learned by what I was told and when to go. So you want to go when the bark is loose, and you chop away and you tear it and you pull it up. And you pull it up, you pull the cedar off. And when I first started, I was getting 10, 12 feet, and I thought I was doing okay. And I talked to another fellow cedar harvester, and he asked me if I told a tree what I was going to do. And I said no. And he says, well, you need to tell the tree you're removing cedar so that you can make a hat, or your auntie can make a hat, or it could be used something ceremonial and thank the tree. So I went up to this tree and I seen this beautiful, beautiful bark on there. And before I chopped into the tree, I said, okay, I've come here today to remove some of your bark, and it's going to be used to make regalia and baskets and hats, and my aunties are going to use what I harvest from you. And I pulled, and I'd normally get 10 to 12 feet. Well, this time I pulled and I had 30 feet. I doubled what I did before. And only thing I changed was I thanked the tree for the usage of the cedar. So I thought it was special, and I thought, you know, it's a thing about harvesting, but we also harvest cedar, and same time as May and June into July. Some guys will still harvest, but after that, it's the bark gets tight on a tree again, and then we have to wait. So it's an important thing that to learn, and I learned how to do this just recently, and I rather enjoy it. And I look forward to going out again this year and harvesting some more cedar.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think it's very important to thank all the different resources out there that we're able to to use and share with the world, and so it's really interesting to hear the different approaches. And so, do you use the whole tree, or is it only a part of the tree that's always used when harvesting cedar?
Well, we use only what we need from this tree. So all the rings of cedar came from individual trees, and all we took was just the little strip of bark. If we needed the whole tree, then we would fall the tree and then proceed from there. But we only wanted the bark on this particular day. So the only thing that we harvested was the bark. And now these trees are still standing, so it's a very renewable resource.
Yeah, definitely a great sustainable way to be able to use the resources.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I mean, some people call it work, but it's fun, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, I remember actually my first time stripping cedar, and it was such an amazing experience. It completely changed the way I looked at the trees and what we're using and able to do, and it was a great experience. So just a heads up for our next coming slides, for those of you who might be sensitive, there are some images of some hunting images with particular species. And so if you are sensitive or squeamish, you might want to just be aware of what's coming next. But yeah, Peter, you can go to the next slide.
Okay, so this is a spring deer hunt. So we were doing a bear study, and we happened upon this deer, and we harvested it. So after it was shot, I went up and I thanked the animal for sacrificing its life to put food on my family's table. And then we used everything that we could from the deer, and we took the meat. I believe the hide went to a drum maker, and yeah, so we used as much as we could from this animal. And typically hunting is done in the winter time, in the fall and the winter, but some elders like the early spring deer, where they're eating a lot of the fresh green plants, and so it's a healthy animal, and that's important. And when Nathan is older, he will partake in hunts like this. And then I think we move to the summer slides from here.
Yeah. think this is our summer season now.
Yeah, so I see time's cutting short, so I'll just make this one nice and quick. So on the side here, we have some sockeye. We went out and we fished them with a net, and we took them home. We cleaned them up. We put them in jars, and we preserved them for future use. And our family, we like to wait at least a year before we open up a jar. So we jar it 1 year, and we consume it the year after. Now the little guy there, that's Nathan, and that's his very first coho salmon. He picked the hook, he put it down, and he caught it, and that's his first one. So I'm pretty happy with that. You know, being able to watch him pull in his first salmon, and you can see he's kind of far away because he wasn't too sure of it. But, you know, he's learning by watching. That's the way I learned. I learned by watching, and he's learning by watching. So every time we get out on the water, he's watching, he's learning. And difference between him and I is when I was a little boy, I didn't wear a life jacket, and he wears one. So, you know, that's kind of salmon. You know, we chase salmon, we chase sockeye with a net, we chase coho and chinook troll. You know, so that's kind of what we do all summer is we chase sockeye and then troll salmon. Okay, again, this is into winter. Now, winter time, my grandfather had a rule: we weren't allowed to hunt ducks until after Halloween. That gives the mother duck time to be off on its own. The young are away in they're living their independent lives. And as you see, we got a bit of a variety. We got a couple of geese. We have a merganser. We have a couple of golden eyes and a mallard. So this is kind of a good harvest day for us. And I'll took all the birds home, and I cleaned them up, and I brought them to my elders. And you know, because we don't eat them here at home, but I like to go and hunt them, and I bring them and share them with my family. You know, it's a wintertime hunt, so I rather enjoy it. And then this is me it's either in it's either in Quay or out at Goose Island, and I'm talking to a group of grad students about Cedar. I'm not sure if this is like a daybed inside a cedar, like a dugout daybed, or if there was a culturally modified feature to this tree or not. But it's something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy being out on the land. You know, like luckily we have this platform right here that we can sit down and have a chat, or you can listen to me. But being out on the land firsthand is where I really like to be, and being a part of a classroom or listening in. So it's important.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, a lot of our programs too are really based on experiential and immersive learning, and we can't wait to get back out there once the time is right. But do you have any kind of insight or any advice for young people who would like to learn more about the land and connecting with nature?
And find a way to get outside. Find somewhere where you can get out and learn. Find, somebody who's experienced the knowledge, so that way when you start learning, you learn from somebody that has the knowledge and is willing to share. It's going to make it so much easier where you either want to go out and just try and learn on your own, or go and do on your own. Find someone that has the knowledge and soak it all in and learn from them as much as you can, and have fun outside.
Yeah, some great words. I have so many more questions, but I will leave that to the end. We'll have time for everyone in their questions as well. But yeah, I'm going to pass it now to Peter.
All right. I'm going to be introducing our next guest. Our next guest is a good friend of mine, Sarah Jim. Sarah Jim is an emerging artist of mixed ancestry and is a member of the Wasinich Nation from Sycam Village. She holds a BFA from UVic and conducts environmental restoration on her ancestral territory in Wasinich. Creating place-based artwork of her homelands and waters allows her to educate others about the importance of native food systems and coastal medicines in relation to the ecosystem and Wasinich culture. I've seen her do all this. It's great. She's really thriving in kind of cultural resurgence in art, and yeah, I'm really glad to be able to call her a friend. So without further ado, yeah, here we go. Here's Sarah.
It's great,
Hi,
Joe.
Sarah.
It's great, Joe. Thank you for that. I'll just do a little quick introduction in Sinchothan. So Sarah Jim Thanasnet, Chesalasanet Kwasanich, Chesalasanet Sycam Ilalungs. My name is Sarah Jim. I'm from Kwasanich, from the Sycam village. My father's name is David Jim. His traditional name is Sequempton. He's Mexican and Coast Salish, and my mother, her name is Wendy. She's Russian Jewish. So thank you, Peter and Maureen and Raincoast, for facilitating this and having me. I'm honored to be a part of it. And thank you, Howard, for your words. You were talking about cedar harvesting, and it made me excited to go out with a friend of mine. Her name's Papakia. She's going to teach me how. And she recently taught me that the dogwood flowers are indicators for Saanich to go harvest cedar. And I thought that was fascinating. You know, there was a lot of parallels between Howard's culture and Saanich culture, you know, how the land kind of informs us on what activities to do throughout the year. And so I was invited to talk about the Reef net and the Reef net practices, the technology. And I was lucky enough to set a Reef net last summer, and it was incredible. It was the second time in 100 years that a Reef net was set, because this technology was outlawed in 1916 from the Canadian government. So the government looked upon it as a fish trap, which is the total opposite of what in actuality it is. So because Saanich live on the Saanich Peninsula on southern Vancouver Island, we have no major rivers, and so we have to go intercept the salmon out in the straits. And so we are considered saltwater people. We have a word called tanuch, which means land and water, and that indicates there's no difference between the two. We didn't view land differently from the ocean. And a lot of our place names are based on looking at the land from the water. So for example, where Peter's from, Sayout, that's called houses stacked on top, and that's from the view of the water. Also, a lot of the islands are named after kind of the same concept. So Sinanis is chest sticking out of the water. And so that I wanted to indicate that we are saltwater people. We belong on the water, and half of our territory is water. And so the reef net, which is Squala, reef net in Sinchothan, was a major part of our ways of being. And so Squala is the word for willow, and that's what the net was made out of. And these were extremely time-consuming nets to make. And it kind of is a beautiful thing where it ties the land to the water. So you take terrestrial plants and you put them out in the water for salmon to be caught in. And so I mentioned that the reef net is not a fish trap. It is an active conservation. It's a sustainable way of fishing. And so the significant part about this net is there's an escapement hole in the center. And this image that is on the slide right now is a depiction of my interpretation of a reef net. And so you can see in the center there's the hole, and these 4 salmon are kind of going into it. They're swimming into the net, and some of them will escape. And Saanich knew that this was the only way that the lineage would be continued. And, you know, I was always taught there's beliefs in our culture that you never take more than you need. And so we knew that, like, these salmon were on the way to their rivers. People on those rivers would be catching them. The bears would need them. The eagles would be catching them. And so this is sustainability. This is conservation, allowing some of the salmon to escape, to continue their families. And so this piece I created for the Reef Net exhibition at the Legacy Art Gallery. This exhibition was all about the reef net. It was called To Fish as Formerly, and that is wording from the Douglas Treaty that we have here in Saanich. And so I don't really want to get into that, but essentially Saanich people have the right to hunt and fish as formerly. And so this exhibition was all about showcasing traditional knowledge, Coast Salish art, you know, practices that have been around for generations. And so I made this piece to depict the view of the salmon. So the salmon are swimming into the net, and they're going in a counterclockwise direction, which is significant to Saanich. When we do anything, we do it in a counterclockwise direction. And my cousin told me because that's the way the moon travels around the earth, which I think is beautiful. You know, the moon, I'm sure Peter has talked about this before, but we live by a 13 moon calendar. And essentially this calendar dictates what we do throughout the year. So, for example, the Wakis moon is when the frogs, you start to hear the frogs again, and it tells us that their life is coming back to the earth. And so in this art piece, I depicted 4 of the salmon because there's 4 salmon moons in our 13 moon calendar. Around the edges, you can see there's dune grass, and this was tied to the net to calm the salmon and give them a sense of security. It would kind of trick them into thinking they were safe at the bottom of the ocean, but really they were swimming up into the net. And then around that are the anchor stones or net weights. And these were to secure the net to the bottom of the ocean. And the fascinating thing about those is that they'd be handed down from generation to generation because they were so time consuming to create. So there's a big hole in the middle of these big rocks. And the way that this was done was a harder rock would be on the anchor stone, and we'd find a dripping water source. And eventually the erosion would make that hole in the rock. And then you'd flip it over and do it on the other side. So I love that. It's biomimicry. You know, in rivers, you see this done all the time, and Saanich have just harnessed that technology and manipulated it into benefiting them. So I just want to reiterate that this is ancient, advanced technology, and I'm just so happy I got to be a part of it last year and create art about it and talk about it. Yeah, so when we paddled out to the Swalet, which is where these reef net sites are, Swalets are usually south-facing bays, and salmon run right through them. You know, we're kind of, there's Gulf Islands dotted all around us. We have islands all in our territory. And so a Swalet would belong to a family, and so they'd have their own fishing sites. My family site is on the United States side in Blaine by Samiamu, but we got permission from this family to to set a net at their site beside Pender Island or Seagull. And so we had to paddle from Sydney to Pender, which took 4 and a bit hours. And at the beginning of this Reef Net project, which was youth-led, some of us hadn't even paddled ever before. Like, we were very new to being on the water. You know, we're a little bit urban. I don't know, a lot of those practices have been a little bit lost, and including myself. Like, I don't spend that much time on the water, but this day in particular, we had a blessing ceremony, we had prayers said, we brushed our canoes off with cedar. You know, we really practiced a good way of being on the water. And so that day, I felt like I could have canoed forever. You know, I think it was just the power of the group that we had and the ancestors being with us, and, you know, all the good intentions we had. I felt like that gave me strength. And before that, I would get tired within like half an hour. So that was really special to be able to, you know, have the camaraderie with this ReefNet project group, and also know that this has been done many times before by ancestors. You know, as I mentioned, we're saltwater people, so it was in our blood and our genes, and it was really special. And when we actually set the net, we didn't catch anything. You know, we had a lot of logistical issues, like the net getting tangled and time management and things like that. But I think just being out there and just the act of revitalizing this practice was incredible. And so I encourage anyone to look into reef net fishing, and if you have a chance to go out on the water, please do. Like, it's very humbling. Yeah, and I don't normally. Yeah, this image is an artwork that I made right before we set off to Pender, and I just wanted to kind of honor our group, and it inspired me to make this piece. And so the hands are thanking the land, thanking the water for everything that it does. You know, the ancestors are kind of holding us up, and we're surrounded by these medicines, which are the plants and these little seeds called gachmin. And then the canoe with the sun coming out of it is kind of just like a good wish. And there's little raindrops in there that allude to our creation story. So all Saanich people originate from the rain, a man named Slamuch. And so I really like to make art that can tell a story and can educate others about the culture. And I usually just do environmental restoration. And so I'm not on the water often. I'm mostly on the land, taking out invasive species and planting native plants. You know, I've been learning about traditional knowledge for the past 3 years now, and it's really connected me to the culture and the community. And I'm glad I can share this knowledge through art. And so I found that art is a really good way to open up dialogue about, you know, restoration practices and the importance of native plants. And so I guess I will just finish off by advocating for that. Please go plant native plants wherever you are. If you have a little balcony, if you have a giant swath of land, you know, the land informs Saanich of who we are, of how we act, of what we do. Our language and art comes from the land. You can see there's crescents and trigons in the canoe of this image. And those, I've been told by a relative, Doug LaFortune, that all of the Coast Salish elements can be found in the bones of a fish. I've seen them in barks of a tree, in ripples of the water. And so the land really informs the culture. And so I think I just want to end by advocating to restore the land, plant native plants, and this can be a form of physical decolonization. I know that decolonization is a giant intangible concept. And so I like to be hands-on with it and start from there. And so thank you for having me. And if there's any questions, I'd be very happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks so much for sharing. I'm just going to do a couple plugs. If you want to see more of Sarah's art, you can find more at sarahjimstudio.com. And if you have any questions for Sarah or Howard, we're going to start taking questions soon. Drop them in the comments so that we can see them. And I did want to go back to kind of the 13 moons calendar. We've gotten a lot of interest from that from our previous episodes. And you mentioned, let's see, how there's like 4 salmon moons, and in the Wasanich 13 moon calendar that we've shown before, a lot of people are kind of wondering where that's available. And there is a lot of info on wasanich.com. On the Wasanich Leadership Council's website, there are some posts about the 13 moon calendars, and kind of they usually post about what moon we're currently in or kind of going into. And there they'll kind of have some images of the 13 moon calendar and some other info linked there. So check that out at wasanich.com. All right, I think we're almost ready to start taking some questions. Oh, actually, we have that short film to show. Yeah, I can show that. There's a little film that maybe you'd want to introduce it, Sarah.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, so King Tide Films came along on our journey to Sedaeus and captured the moments of paddling and setting the net and just being together as a group. And so he did an incredible video of a summary of that trip. So please enjoy.
We paddled here from Sydney, and we are here to set a reef net.
This is a revitalization and a resurgence project that's led by youth of our Saanich communities to restore and bring back our connection to this place, and in particular through the practice of the swala, or our reef net fishery.
It's both a symbol that we are here and wanting to express ourselves in the way that we've always expressed ourselves, and to reignite and reconnect with really important governance structures in our communities. But it's also an important signal to, I think, the rest of the world that there's a resurgence within the Indigenous communities, and that it's being inspired by the teachings of our elders, but it's being done by our youth.
Where we're sitting right now is an Indian reserve allocated to us under the Indian Act, but this was our home for thousands and thousands of years. We have a reef net site right across from us, right across the harbor.
Reef net site that they'll be going out to today is our reef net site that belonged to the village. Skista. That's what it was called, and the reef net belonged to all the people that lived there at Quinnanuch.
The reef net was outlawed for the past 100 years, so this is the second time in the past decade that it's been coming out from our people.
There's so much of my culture that, is not really like kept away from me, but haven't totally had access to. So, just having all these elders like share their teachings and, personal experiences has been so awesome.
It's something that this generation couldn't get our hands on, right? But to bring it back is just heartwarming.
I think it's super important to revitalize that and bring it back into our communities.
My dad was actually the one who did the most recent, project like this, his PhD. Just being able to, say that I'm following in his footsteps, it's really humbling.
Most of them didn't know how to paddle a canoe. Now they knew that. They didn't know anything about making a net. They know how to do that now.
It's just important for me because when I learn this, I'm going to be able to pass this along to future generations as well. and I have a 4-year-old daughter, so this means a lot to me to be a part of something like this.
And then with my dad saying that we have to pass this on one day is amazing. Just to think like I'm gonna be teaching this to somebody one day.
Being able to revitalize something that was so important to our people, because this was one of our lifelines. Being able to have this knowledge and gaining the responsibility to pass it down to the next generation, it couldn't mean more.
A lot of our stuff is getting lost. And this was teaching them, bringing it back.
To be bringing it back is amazing. I mean, I can't even put words to what that feels like for us.
And to bring it back is just, becoming our people even more again. We're regaining ourselves back. It's a good thing.
I'm glad you showed that because it just solidified like the importance of this practice. And, everyone that was a part of that group, we have the responsibility of carrying that knowledge, and it's easier to carry things collectively than as an individual. So thank you for showing that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing everything about the project and what's going on. And it's really inspiring to see all these young people involved and so passionate about it as well. So yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to watch the full video, you could check out the credits in our description on Facebook or YouTube. This is hard link to memorize, but it's in the credits, so you can always check that full video, and it's very, very powerful. So I highly recommend it. Yeah, so I'm gonna bring everybody back, and I just wanna thank everyone again for your amazing sharing of knowledge. I've learned so much just from listening to the different things that you guys have been highlighting about the different seasons and harvesting. So we'll open up the dialogue now for any questions that you might have. And I definitely have a couple of questions. So maybe we'll start with there's one from Jessica. So I think this one is for you, Sarah. So she said, I was curious which environmental monitoring agency you work with. She's just graduating and getting into the field and looking for opportunities. What do you recommend?
Congratulations on graduating. I work with a couple different entities. So the main one for a long time has been Papaic and Hayout, and that's a native plant and garden program at the tribal school here in Brentwood. That's very Saanich led, so we like to accommodate for Saanich members. And I've also recently been hired on to Parks Canada doing some restoration on the Gulf Islands. So I would maybe talk to Rain Coast.
Yeah, definitely get out and just try as many experiences as possible. The more experience you get, the more knowledge you learn, and yeah, definitely feel free to contact Rain Coast. We'll see what we got. But yeah, I actually have a question for Howard. So we chatted a little bit about the different seasons and indicators, but just wondering, because you've been doing it since you were 3 years old harvesting, have you noticed differences in like populations or stocks of the different things that you're harvesting throughout the years? Have there been any like, changes or more difficulty or challenges in as the years go by?
Over the number of years that I've been harvesting, numbers have dropped dramatically, but they've been on a decline for decades before I was a harvester. A lot of it is overfishing. Some of it is environmental, and more recently, it is becoming a lot of environmental things that could impact a species. Like salmon. If a year goes by and it's a really dry year up here, well, the salmon they can't get up into the river, and if they can't get into the river, they start to stress and they die in the bay. If it's a really wet year, the fish get up quicker and we don't count them, and then we don't know how many are there. So environmental changes are a huge thing nowadays. Where when I was little, environmental wasn't really so much so. Either that, or we're just now bringing them into light and saying, yeah, that environmental things have a lot of things to do with how much we can harvest, or how much is getting back into the river.
Mhm. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of changes happening in terms of climate and our environment for sure. And so, do you have any kind of approaches or ideas of ways that we can approach this more sustainably?
Mm, I mean, it's tough because down in the lower Vancouver Island, it's different down there than it is up here. So it's just a matter of trying to fish for what we need, not take everything, but fish for what we need. And then once we're done, then we don't need to go and catch them if we don't need them. That's kind of one of the things that we're looking at now is taking what we need, as opposed to taking as much as we can and then trying to get rid of it. Take what we need and leave the rest for other families.
Yeah, that's a great message, and that appears to be a message that seems to be reoccurring as we do our series. That you take what you need, and a lot of these traditional methods as well and practices really kind of emphasize sustainability and being able to let, for example, in the reef net, let some fish go so that the population can continue. And so these are definitely lots of great things to think about moving forward with conservation in the ways we approach different resources out there.
On that topic, I do have a question for Sarah. I've heard a lot about like the significance of the opening on the reef nets. I think it's like made out of a certain part of the willow wood or something. Do you know? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I know it is significant. Obviously, the escapement hole. I only know that the name for it is Chalice or Chali, and that it translates to life. And so, obviously, it was a significant part of the net, but I wish I could answer that question a little bit better. There are some artist interviews from the Reef Net exhibition that me and Chaz had done in the summertime, and you can just YouTube those or go to the Legacy Art Gallery website and watch those, and you can get some pretty good insight about logistics of the net and things like that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's the UVic Legacy Art Gallery on their website.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question for Sarah. So the ReefNet project looked like it launched, was it last year or the year before? Last year. Yeah, and so what's in stakes for the future of this project? Will you continue it or try it again? Or are there talks of continuing creating the ReefNet again?
Yeah, so this project was coordinated by the Saanich Leadership Council. It was youth-led, which was incredible. And there has been talk from the council to do another project similar to the one that happened last year. And I think it would be new youth, but I think it would be valuable to have the past youth visit this project and kind of talk about their experiences. So there's speculation, no confirmation.
So yeah, it'd be great to see it continue to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, yeah. It was really great to just be around other Saanich youth. I don't do that often, and it's probably the best thing to come out of 2020.
Yeah, that's positive for sure. Right.
I don't see too many more questions online, but we do have some nice kind of messages. First from Jessica. Howard, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today. I really appreciate learning from your traditional ways of knowing. From the same person for Sarah. Sarah, so happy to hear that you were able to participate in the reef net fishing tradition. You have a gift of sharing such powerful words for advocation and inspiring.
Right, Scott.
Yeah, and just with that, I want to thank our guests today again. You've had some amazing, inspiring words for everybody, and hopefully everyone learned on the different ways of harvesting and some lessons from our guests today. So I want to thank Howard and Sarah. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having.
And I think so yeah, I'm just gonna give a quick plug for our next episode. So if you are joining us for our next, in 2 weeks episode, it's all about conservation in action. And so we have been talking about a lot of different topics on the coast. And so our next week, we're really gonna dive into what's being done. And so our Raincoast team, a lot of our Raincoast team members will be joining and updating on some of the projects that we're working on in terms of addressing some conservation challenges on the coast here. And we'll also be sharing some more about how people can take action and tangible steps towards addressing some of these issues.
And also we'd like to do a thank you and shout out to our sponsors for making this web series happen. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to say thanks again to our guests. Thank you everyone who's joined us today. Are there any final words, Sarah or Howard, that you would like to share today before we say goodbye to everyone?
Just Heichka again for having me and amplifying Indigenous voices, and allowing knowledge keepers to reiterate what they've learned. I'm happy to be in the position where I am able to share. I'm kind of just a conduit for all of this ancestral knowledge, and I'm glad I can speak about it. So, Heichka.
I'd like to thank you guys for inviting me to this today. Sarah, one thing that my grandfather told me is everything that is taught to me is not for me. It's for me to pass to the next generation. And listening to you, listening to the powerful words you have, that goes right back to you. All the stuff that you learn, you're now educating others in. And, that's why we've taken time out of our days so that we can teach what we're learning, and we can learn, together like this. So I thank you for your powerful words, and I thank everyone for this opportunity. Go and have a rest of your wonderful day, rest of the wonderful week, and get ready for harvests.
Awesome.
I'm going to get ready for some herring harvest, so enjoy.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Everybody go outside, enjoy the spring weather, and hopefully see you next time.
See you. Aliekwa.